Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here, joined by Carl Buller, Michelle Janikian, and Tim Cools of psychedelicexperience.net. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm feeling great today. Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it and really excited to have you here. Kyle, Michelle, how are you both doing?
Pretty good. Looks like there's a cold front coming in. It's kind of weird. So it's starting to get cloudy and gray and chilly here.
I thought it was summer.
I thought so too.
And Michelle?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. It's the day after 420, and we also have a bit of a nasty, cloudy day, which is not helping, but I'm good otherwise.
And I had a beautiful few runs on the mountain this morning. So
I saw you had 87 days out on the mountain so far?
86 days, 725,000 vertical feet skied. That's only what they tracked.
Wow.
Certainly
I'm so
some
jealous.
software errors. Yeah. Best I've ever skied in my life. I'm really excited. Might start taking like some much more advanced lessons next season. I'm excited about that. All right. So before we dig in, everybody, May 20, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists kicks off. This is the lowest price it's going to be probably for the rest of eternity, I hope. And all other classes will be more money. We've got those all available and scheduled for the rest of the year. I think in the next week or so, we're going to bring on some past students to share some of their personal experiences. So stay tuned for that. If you want to learn more, it is psychedelicEducationCenter.com. That was close. I almost had a brain brownout. So there's 50 milligrams of CBD. So, all right, let's dig in. Tim, you are doing a really cool project. You're doing a relaunch because you've been kind of sidelined for a number of reasons for a bit of psychedelicexperience.net. And I was really excited about it when we discussed it back in Psychedelic Science 2017 when we got to link up in Oakland. And I'm now just even more excited because the need is even greater than it was back then, which was already pretty substantial. So, let's get into a little bit about you and this project. Do you want to start with a little bit about you or about the website?
Maybe just a little bit about me. So that's why I wanted to create this project. So I was always fascinated by psychoactive substances, but then I got this really profound experience that most of us really recognize. So I had this ayahuasca experience and it really changed my life. It really opened me up to some kind of feeling that I never experienced before. And this was really, really profound for me and it really changed my life. And afterwards, I started to research everything I could related to psychedelics. I was really surprised. That was in 2015. That there was already really a lot of research behind it. That's all a really scientific background. And so it was really exciting for me. I started to read all the books and I also started to read all these stories about people getting negative sides of this kind of practices. So more specifically, the problems that we see in the Amazon. Back then, there were quite some stories about sexual abuse, about people getting robbed, people even dying. If you try to search the media, the stories are really awful sometimes. And I was really confused in the beginning because I had this really, really powerful experience. And on the other side, you have these people who work with this kind of plants and kind of medicine. And they do these kind of things. Honestly, I even doubt sometimes that it was really working because it was really such a different world. But then I have a background in software engineering. So I thought, yes, let's do something about it. I had this strong feeling that I had to do something to help people have this kind of experience in a safe and a responsible way. And what I do is creating software. So I thought, yes, let's make something like maybe a TripAdvisor for psychedelic experiences, of places where you can go for psychedelic experiences.
Right. And this whole abuse topic and risk topic has been huge over the past decade. Like there's been quite a few deaths and serious injuries at ayahuasca facilities and, no lack of sexual misconduct in these spaces too. So it was really necessary to have a place to be able to discuss this. And, there's places out there that look like TripAdvisor for this stuff, but realistically, they're a financial jumping board into those spaces. They want to make it easier for you to pay money to go and, not have you second guessing the transaction. And I think that's really the difference with your site's really important because you're allowing for negative reviews. And I think that's super crucial right now.
Yes, only in the last few weeks I was being made aware of new sites who also lists therapists and psychedelic places. But yes, all of them, they have a for-profit model. So we consciously decided to have a non-profit model because we really didn't want to have any financial incentives to do this. Of course, we want to have a financially healthy organization. So we will go for creating products. So we will find some grants, etc. But we will not optimize to sell people retreats. And that's a big difference between the other centers or the other websites that are online at the moment. So,
yeah. Michelle, from your experience and everything you've seen in the psychedelic world, do you have any kind of reactions to this kind of idea of a review site for, shamans, facilitators, centers, etc.?
I think it's a great initiative, and I, thank Tim for seeing the need for this and to, then go and create something that's such a great, a big step that a lot of us, don't have the ability, but also the energy to create. So thank you, Tim. I think this is really necessary right now when you're, looking for a retreat or an underground guide. It's so tricky, and there is really no reliable online place to read reviews or really get information about this kind of thing that's non-biased, right? And so I do look forward to having this as a resource, being able to look up my new facilitator before I go into ceremony with them, or to look up the retreat program before, putting down $3,000 for something like this. So I think it's a really great thing to exist on the web, and I'm excited, and I hope people use it, and to review their facilitators, not just when you get the email after the retreat to support people, but also if you had a pretty rough time, to explain why, so other folks don't get into the same kind of uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, definitely. It's important that people know what kind of place they go to. It's not only about the abuse, it's also about finding a place that feels right for you. We have this whole range of ways of working with medicines. We have the very shamanic way, we have the traditional way, like in Mexico or in the Amazon. And then we have the opposites, like synthesis, with a very professional or the very scientific way of working. So we have all these different ways of working, and then we have all practitioners who are in between. They have this neo-shamanic way of working, and everybody will align with some way of working. But I'm sure that if you send somebody very rational from the academic world to the Amazon, most of them, they will be frightened before they arrive at the retreat. Not all of them, but it's also about finding the right place for the right people. So it's not only, it's definitely also not the intention to put these centers or these people in a bad spotlight. It's about improving the way how they work. It's about starting communication. Hey, we notice that people report that you are doing this or that you are not doing this, so that we can start a communication with these centers or with these people who work with this medicine. And also that we get other organizations involved, that we can have organizations involved who define the rules, or not the rules, who define guidelines like code of ethics, which are very important for this kind of work. And due to the lack of regulation, it's still a lot of work to do. And I think we don't need a regulation. I think as a community, we need an effort to handle this. We need to step up, and we need to provide a platform. That's also why we want to have as much community support as possible. So like Psychedelics today, but also the Thank You Plant Medicine, Microdosing Institute, trying to do partnerships with psychedelic societies, all these kind of organizations. We're also compiling a board of scientific advisors. At the moment, we have Joe Neal, he's a professor in Manchester. Wade Davis also joined David Luke from the Breaking Conventions, to name a few. So we really want to have this community support and not just jumping on the bandwagon to follow the hype. Actually, I started in 2016. It was before the hype, or at least before the biggest part of the hype. But I think it's really important for us that we do this with integrity and with ethics.
I agree. And accountability is really what's lacking in this kind of underground gray area. Even when retreats are in legal countries, it is still, you're right, there's no regulation, right? And so this will be a community form of accountability. Is that correct? And I think that is so important and what's really lacking right now. And you're right, it's not just about to avoid abusers, but that's a big part. But to make people feel safe and comfortable, right? And to know your options. I think a lot of folks, when they're starting this search, they don't really know that there is a shamanic route. There is this more psychological route. And then there's also this kind of in-between route that combines the two. In a way, some facilitators have kind of a combination. And I think for folks to really feel the most safe and comfortable when they're going into such a powerful and vulnerable situation is to be really educated and to know, right? And so this is so great. I'm really excited. I hope folks, share and use this platform. That's going to be what makes it even more valuable, right?
Exactly. The most power we have if we have a lot of reviews, a lot of information about how they work. And this is important for the people who want to go there, the people who want to have this kind of experiences. But we will also use this information for scientific research. So the more information we have about people going to retreats, people going to centers, we can share it in an open data way with the researchers that are on the boards, that we can work together with institutes, not having this very isolated way of working that many of the research organizations are doing at the moment, but really trying to opening it up to the broad public, to the community. And this is something I was really surprised that, for example, the research, one of the first book I read was Rick Strassman about DMT. And my first idea of the website was actually to build a website where people can share their psychedelic experience, something like Arrowit, but then Arrowit 3.0, where people can share it and people can review their experiences. But I was really surprised that the data or the interviews that he did with his participants were not public. Mm. In my opinion, this should be all in the public domain. If you're doing science, how can somebody verify the science if you're not making all these interviews public? So,
that's a really good point.
Yeah, this is the closed source to open source debate, right? An open data debate. I remember talking to one of the Eroids at the 2017 conference and talked about, I was sharing your project with them because I was really excited about what you were doing with structured data and open data. And they shared a story about some scientists asking for access to their data. And, during one of their maintenance windows, they were able to export data. It maybe took 5 minutes. And I believe there was about 10 papers that were able to be generated from that, 5 minutes of work on their end. And the fact that we'll have, open, accessible data in a structured format. Structured is, really important. And people don't necessarily understand structured versus unstructured usually. But if you do, you'll understand how good this is going to be for psychedelic science. It's going to be extraordinary. And, it doesn't take, a $15 million grant to get this thing rolling. And universities even are kind of complicit in this too, right? Like they don't want their data going out because somebody might beat them to the chase. So as a result, you keep your data secret. So it's a complicated deal, but important to understand. So I'm really, really excited about that as well. Cool. So I didn't realize you had David Luke, Wade Davis, and who is the third scientific advisor?
Jo Neal. She's a professor and she's working for the drug science also. We have wonderful. A few more. We have a few more. Tomorrow we have the first big meeting with everybody. Really exciting to have this support from the science and really people looking forward to to be able to collect this kind of data and then to share it with each other. I'm really, really looking forward to see what kind of project will come out of this.
Me too.
It's so great. So great. I love that you've got the David Nutt's team, kind of like drug science team, looped in. That's super great. And I love that it's, Europe and, North America are tied in too. It's not just one siloed project. It's really important.
Yes. So I started working on it alone, and I did for a very long time, but yes, I couldn't do it alone. So last year, I opened it up to the community. I asked who wants to join, who wanted to be involved. Let's create this organization together, like a flat organization, and had quite some response. And now we have people in Canada, in the US, somebody in Thailand, people in the UK, in Spain. So we have this international group, and the advisors, they are also from South America. So we have this really international group of people that's try to work on this together.
That's outstanding. And so the reason we had you on today is you have a big launch coming up on Saturday. So finally, a great relaunch of psychedelicexperience.net, and you've got a film screening going. Can you tell me about the film and the panel?
Yes. So on Saturday we have this event online, so people can subscribe and see the Psychedelia documentary. It's a 1-hour documentary about the science, about the mystical experience. It's very interesting. It's has some interesting guests also, and we're doing a live panel discussion with me, David Luke, and then Pat, who is the creator of the documentary. So this will be on Saturday. It will be on 7 p.m. European time, and I think it's in the morning on the Pacific, I guess, something like that. So people can register on the website. I will provide the link. Will be nice. It will be a Q&A panel discussion, so people can get involved, ask questions, see what the intentions are, see what we can do. Maybe you have good ideas what we can do with the project. So really look forward to meet many of the people there.
That's awesome. I'm really excited about that, and we'll be sure to get the word out. I think we'll email everybody about it. And, a few other events coming up in the next bunch of days too. So it's really awesome, Tim. Anything else you want to fit in before we start digging into all this fun news?
No, I just want to thank you all for the support. It's really nice to do this as a community. I think community is very important. Now these days we have this internet communities. It's really important to do this together. Just a big thank you.
Yeah. You are welcome, and thank you for all your work. I know this is not easy stuff. It's hard. All these psychedelic projects are hard. Nothing really goes as planned unless you get millions in your lap right away to go for it. All right. Well, psychedelicexperience.net. Everybody check that out. The website's live, but it'll be even more live on Saturday. So make an account, share some stories, support science. Yeah. And tell your friends. Yeah. So first article here is from Forbes. I've got some fun commentary on this. Researchers in Europe, U.S. team up to produce first ever 5-MeO-DMT psychedelic training program. This is by David Carpenter, contributor at Forbes. Essentially what they're announcing is some sort of partnership between Fluence and Beckley. And it looks like the folks at Fluence are going to be developing a clinical training program around 5-MeO-DMT specifically for this project. Michelle, since you're the primary journalist here, what were your first reactions to this article?
Well, I guess my first reaction, was that it's good that they are creating a 5-MeO training program for facilitators. When I first read the headline, I thought it was more like psychonautic training, and I got really excited, like how to navigate 5-MeO. Mm-hmm. But, there is really 5-MeO is new, and there's really a big lack of any kind of like regulatory or training or any kind of like standardized practice, right? And, there was just a lot of drama with some 5-MeO facilitators and how they really work in a kind of aggressive way. And so I think having this training is really important that's all the thoughts I had this week. I don't know. What about you? What did you guys think?
Tim, or let's go with Kyle first, I guess. You just came off mute there.
Cool. Yeah, I've been trying to mute. I don't know if you guys were hearing some of the thunder in the background, but a big storm just rolled through. I thought this was a pretty interesting article, just to hear that Beckley Psytech, they're coming up with like an intranasal formulation for 5-MeO. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out, and just kind of like the efficacy of that. And I also thought it was interesting that they have Dr. Fiona Dunbar there, Chief Medical Advisor at Beckley Psytech, who used to be at Janssen Pharmaceuticals, I believe. And I'm not too sure she was part of the whole licensing process around esketamine, but I know they mentioned Janssen Pharmaceuticals was, tied up with that and obviously helped to push esketamine out. But yeah, I think just the research with 5-MeO is super important, and just glad to hear that there's going to be some training. I'm a little confused by some of the stuff in the article, just stating around like really leveraging like telehealth and kind of like the digital aspect here. And I'm wondering, like, are they training facilitators to like how is this going to roll out like long term? Are they going to be able to kind of like give people intranasal and then have like a support person there virtually, kind of like what Mindbloom's doing with ketamine? I don't know. It doesn't go into too much detail, but I thought it was pretty interesting. So it says Beckley Psytech says their intentions is to develop a training program with Fluence that will enable therapists to interact with patients remotely, leveraging digital technologies to improve patient treatment and care, and to reduce utilization healthcare resources. And that's an important facet, providing access to the masses by keeping costs reasonably affordable for patients who wish to use psychedelic medicines. And I guess, as most people probably know that have been following 5-MeO, it's very somatic and can be really intense. So I'm wondering, maybe it won't be as intense as smoked 5-MeO DMT, because we obviously know the bioavailability of something being smoked is, a little bit more than, nasal or oral. So I wonder what the effect will be like when they do roll that out. And could it be safe to maybe use it on your own versus smoked 5-MeO and needing somebody there to support you when you do have those somatic sensations, or, you're in the unit of God consciousness and not aware of your body.
I remember Mitch Gomez years ago telling me it's hard to even classify 5-MeO DMT as a psychedelic. It's so different in so many ways. And I think we should understand that. Yeah, Tim, any kind of comments from your side on this one?
Yeah, I was really wondering what kind of dose will they apply if they have to do it themselves. Probably it's the same as with the ketamine, that they have this phrase that it will be a very small dose, I guess. But the side effects, if you have to write down the side effects of this kind of medicine, it will be, I don't think it would be very smart to give people this themselves, to administer themselves. So I agree with Kyle that it's a very somatic experience, and people ego death is most often happening. So I'm really curious how they will fit this in the protocol.
Yeah, it's really, really creepy. So my impression, Michelle, was this. It seems like Forbes is continuing to fall apart, and it seemed like this is more of a PR piece than like news. Like, is Forbes just now doing press releases? It read like a press release to me, and not like journalism. Because there wasn't any of these things asked.
What I wasn't saying before, I guess, honestly, I guess I'll just say this publicly. I don't really trust Forbes. I don't really take their news very seriously, because I know how their payment structure works for writers. And it's so low that the only way to make this work is if you are creating basically sponsored content. And so I don't really trust it as journalistic information. They do read more like press releases. It is really unfortunate, but yeah, because if this was more of a non-biased approach, they'd be asking these kinds of questions within the article, no? And they would have other sides. They would have other experts chiming in to be like, hey, wait a second, 5-MeO is a bit different than other psychedelics. I don't know if this is the safest thing to be giving at home. It's not clear that is what will happen. That's really interesting. I don't think that's a good idea either. The thing about 5-MeO is such a short experience that would cut costs compared to LSD or psilocybin or MDMA, just because you'd only need a facilitator for like 30 minutes to an hour to sit with the person, right? And then like these people with really high hourly wages, like therapists and such, that would make it a little bit more affordable compared to like a psilocybin therapy session, but it is such a different experience. I just worry how we portray this to the public using this kind of language and this kind of, 5-MeO is like a really spiritual experience. And yes, that might help people who are dealing with like an existential type of depression or anxiety. However, I think we need to be more explicit when we explain what these substances do, especially in a mainstream magazine like Forbes. And so, yes, it's interesting. And, the people at Fluence are doing really great work. And I don't mean to like bash them, but yeah, this is interesting. I would say everyone should read Forbes with a skeptical eye, because the reporters, they really don't get paid anything. So there has to be other types of compensation going on in the background, in my opinion.
Right. And it does seem like a pretty typical PR pipeline. And, just watch it. Watch it carefully. I'm glad Fluence is in the mix. They're very careful, very clinical, very different from psychedelics today, which is good to have out there. And yeah, Tim's point about dose, very important. Like if it's, 1 milligram or half a milligram, and, maybe they ship it in single dose tubes, so you only get it like once a month or something. Maybe that's
would you even
wildly
break through?
Different. Who knows? And perhaps breakthrough is not the point. I don't understand their model. They didn't really lay it out in the article.
Yeah, they just said that they're going to be breaking new ground. This is a quote here from Cosmo. We'll be breaking new ground with the first clinical study on intranasal 5-MeO DMT, conducting initial phase 1 trial with 42 participants.
Yeah, cool. And maybe the only reason we're not in Forbes is we don't have a PR person yet. So
I was really surprised. That they have this so many articles about psychedelics recently.
Yeah, a lot of stuff on 5-MeO too recently I've been seeing from them, which is like really interesting to see them kind of push that with such a powerful medicine.
Yes, the risk profile of 5-MeO is very different as the others. The chance of reactivations, the chance of distress, it's not for most people, I think, 5-MeO. I would not recommend it for most people.
And it's not, none of those side effects are really talked about in this article, are they? Because that is really important, especially the reactivation. I would actually personally love more research on that, which if listeners don't know, it's basically like a type of lasting visual distortions that can occur, right? And without information on this, without more studies, like safety studies on 5-MeO, I don't really think that it's appropriate to have other types of studies, in my opinion. We need to figure out, more about the safety profile of this very newly discovered psychedelic compared to other compounds.
Yeah. I know the reactivation is wildly common. I think, wasn't Alan Davis presenting on that at Horizons a while back? And
that made a big
largely
impact.
They're nice. Like
they're
largely
positive,
they're okay.
for the most part.
But for whatever reason, they don't happen when people are driving their cars to work or something. That could be really dangerous, but it happens in different settings. And it's more than just the visual distortions. Often they report being totally back in the experience, as intense as it was, the day or weeks before. I know friends that flew home from a ceremony and they were deep in it on the airplane. And, a couple missteps on the airplane and you can't fly ever again, especially nowadays. So there's a lot of things happening that would make me want to be a little cautious around 5-MeO as well. Let's just name again, sorry everybody that I have to say it, but Octavio Rettig, Dr. Jerry Sandoval, very problematic 5-MeO people. And there's others as well, like Martin Ball, clearly, there's some problems there. So what is it about 5-MeO that allows for this, and the culture around 5-MeO DMT that allows for this? There's some questions to be asked there. I don't doubt that it would be a great therapeutic agent. I don't doubt that it's amazing for spiritual exploration, but I'm pretty sure that things like megalomania and kind of cult development disorder is like inside that to a degree, or something about the interaction with the human organism and that molecule. So I think that's enough about Forbes for now. So we talked about this Robin Carhart-Harris study that was in New England Journal of Medicine about psilocybin versus Paxil. They had a different name for the compound, but Paxil's the U.S. trade name. And is that right? Was it Paxil or was it something different?
I didn't look into it.
Elaparidam, or something like that. Anyway, Robin, go ahead.
Escitalopram. I never know how to say these things. Escitalopram.
Yeah, they do that on purpose, right? So the study essentially was shaped in such a way to suggest that this SSRI and psilocybin treatments in a clinical setting, there's no statistical difference between the two effects. Robin, in his blog here, we'll link to it. It's on MyDelica, which is his kind of software company. MyDelica. Title of the article is Data versus Spin, commentary on trial of psilocybin versus escitalopram for depression. And long and short, it looks like New England Journal of Medicine really did a number on the article they submitted. Far more shaping on the data than they would have expected. And they chose the worst measure to highlight in the study, which is really interesting. And apparently that particular measure that they highlighted is, quite suspect and not very detailed. And we have a blog coming on this soon from one of our contributors, and really excited about that one. But yeah, I don't know. Open floor. Who wants to jump in on this one as a commentary?
Yeah, and just...
Yes, I think it is.
No, you can go, Tim. I was just going to say, so the brand name there for that medication is Lexapro for those.
Lexapro. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's just highlights again the importance of the importance of open data and importance of open science. That's I cannot understand that the review of such a paper can modify this much in a paper. I really cannot understand it. And then if this happens for this and this is made public, how often did it happen in the past? How often did it happen with all kind of other papers?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were like, might not have access to the full paper, right? So they're reading the abstracts, they're reading like whatever is available. And as Dr. Carhart-Harris and others really kind of pointed out, there was a lot of information in the appendices and, lots of different graphs that, maybe people weren't reading or seeing. And, there's a lot of data there that wasn't, I guess, really being looked at when a lot of these headlines were coming out.
Right. Like, how interesting would that be if in the US, pharma, as part of the FDA process, was forced to make their data open so that we could understand the results from phase 0, 1, 2, 3 better than we do today? Because how many studies were buried? Like, we know that there was tons of fuckery around SSRIs. We absolutely know that data is quite skewed. I'm not saying SSRIs are evil. I just think the data is not very clear. But in part because pharma buried a lot of that information. They have the ability to totally tank studies and not push them to the FDA if they don't want to. And that seems quite problematic.
Yeah, but on the other side of this, I mean, so the reason that the New England Journal of Medicine edited it in this way, according to Robin Carhart-Harris's blog post, is because the depression scale, the QIDS depression scale that didn't show statistical significance, was the one that the researchers chose to be their main scale. And that's why he edited it in that way. Like, not to play devil's advocate, but, there is a purpose for editors in the scientific study review process. It's a checks and balances. And so I imagine the original draft of this article that they submitted probably was praising psilocybin's effects a lot higher. And they wanted to be more cautious because that's not exactly how they framed the study. And, if you go through, and we'll talk about some of the responses to this article, but if you look and see how all the researchers in this study they're also being financially supported by corporate interests. And so, it's almost a good thing in a way that this was kind of cautious, because if it was a little bit different, I mean, couldn't that just be Compass Pathway, Field Trip Health, and these other sponsors doing the same thing that the drug companies did for SSRIs? And so I'm almost not upset about this. I think there's been a lot of different reactions in the community. If you go through and look at the numbers, clearly people felt a little bit better after psilocybin, and they also had less negative side effects, which is, I think, really important, like less sexual dysfunction and these kinds of things that SSRIs can cause that actually end up hurting people's quality of life even more. But, I think this is a complicated one, but this is the kind of thing we're going to have to keep dealing with in the community. This trial wasn't that big. It was only 59 people. And, it's tricky, but I'm not totally upset with the results. I think, there's a reason they were edited this way.
Yeah, I agree with you that we need more critical papers out there. And, we need to tame the hype, obviously, because these things are getting hyped a little too much as miracle cures, silver bullets, etc. And, we'll get into them in a minute on the next topic, there have been plenty of deaths and harm from psychedelic therapies. And, I don't want to confuse that. SSRIs can have some really hard side effects. They've helped a ton of people, but certainly the side effect profile is not ideal, and people have wildly increased suicidality when they try to withdraw from SSRIs. So, what's worse?
But also, the suicide rate, doesn't it go up the first few weeks that you're on SSRIs too? I think there's been studies that show that. I think the answer is that once people start feeling the effect, they finally have the energy to actually take their own lives. And then there's a spike, I think, once you first start taking them for your risk of suicide. And, so we're about to talk about the risk of suicide with psychedelics as well, but it is important to point out that SSRIs also have a pretty big risk factor when it comes to suicide. Sorry to interrupt you, Joe.
No worries. Tim Kyle, what's your, or Tim, I don't think we heard from you yet on this one.
Yes, I think it's important that we have more studies. It's a fine line between now we get more funding for doing this kind of research, the scientists getting more funding, but they have, of course, then they have this attachment to this profit model, which is not a good thing. So also realistically, it's not possible to do this kind of path to medicalization without this kind of funding.
True.
So it is a fine line. I think this is one part to go. Also, the policy, we need to change the policy on the other side that it will stay democratic. That's also a very important thing. I don't think we should only wait for the scientific world to catch up and to change the policy. I think that's important.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, the profit motive certainly has, people playing games with regulations, and we do need to be on top of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very suspect when big organizations, big players like, Field Trip, Compass start putting stuff out there. So hopefully it's a different game, but I have no reason to really expect that yet. But this, to Tim, your point, like we need more money in the space in order to do these studies.
Yeah.
And, big governments aren't really funding these things in the way many of us think they should be. So, more soon.
We had in Germany, they had the first research that was funded, I think, by the government. But it's very small.
That was pretty substantial, though. That was like many millions from Germany itself. And I imagine as things progress, Germany will probably fund it more once they see the good results. I'm an optimist around the data, but we have to wait for it in order to get the funding through appropriately. Cool. Anything else on this one before we jump to the next one?
Nope, I think we're good. Yeah, I would just, recommend people to like maybe check out that blog, look at some of the graphs there. I mean, you do see kind of a difference between these depression measures. Like there's a gap, a bigger gap between like the Hamilton Depression Scale versus the QIDS. So yeah, I think it's important. And then kind of going back to like your statement there, Tim, about like open science, like I may have access to this journal through like my academic journal database. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't looked it up yet, but yeah, I mean, just again, like not having access to these graphs, like the whole article, just kind of going off of like abstracts and whatever kind of preview the medical journal provides. It's kind of like a limitation for the general public to look at it and make their own interpretations there. And I think that was like the one thing that they stated. This is from the Psychedelic site. On top of the understandable desire to see those satisfying words, we are pleased to accept your manuscript for publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. Was the consoling thought that at least they can't change the actual results, and quote, the readers will be able to look at the values and interpret them themselves. On one slight issue here, however, that many readers only proceed as far as the abstract and need to go further and to properly process the study's results. So yeah, just kind of again pointing out open science, right? If we can't look at the data, then it kind of sucks.
Ironically, I was working with this very bright artificial intelligence, machine learning specialist, and we wanted to do just playing around with some models based on data. And we requested data from the Imperial studies. They have these surveys, but we also never got any reply on that one. So actually, I believe that this data from all these surveys should be public. It's not only for the public, for the general public, but it's also for science. Yeah. They keep it only for their own.
I mean, there are ways to get around it. There are sites that you can pull most of these things off of. But
isn't that what one of the Reddit founders got in big trouble for? Was like accessing a lot of these journal websites, kind of pirate websites.
Probably.
I think that was like, a contributor to that gentleman's death, unfortunately. Anyway, let's jump. Katherine Mclean, famous researcher, spent a lot of time at Hopkins. I think kind of doing a short sabbatical in Bermuda currently. Smart move for COVID, especially through the winter. Had some commentary on this NEJM article related to Imperial, psilocybin, etc. I thought there was some really great commentary in here. Also, didn't 100% agree with everything Katherine was saying, though I did appreciate and understand where she's coming from on a lot of this. Anybody want to kick it off?
Ooh, there's a lot there.
It's so dense. It's kind of the problem.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could read some of it. I mean, she in her comment there, she said, please feel free to copy, paste, share if you wish. So one of her first comments here, depression is a big problem. It's a community, family problem, a cultural problem, or rather lack of connection with family, community, culture, nature. The epidemic of depression is interactive with toxic capitalism, the normalization of violence/abuse, and white male supremacy. Giving high doses of psilocybin to depressed people in a clinical setting will not eradicate depression. We must address the systemic causes of depression while also removing legal obstacles to naturally occurring treatments. In parentheses there, mushrooms. Yeah, definitely agree on a lot of that stuff. Let's see, number 2 here. It may make doctors feel better to have a drug other than ketamine or antidepressants to offer depressed clients, but there are already good alternatives that have been proven safe and effective, like mindfulness meditation and somatic therapy. I've been blown away by the effects of these treatments in people, especially depressed men who claim they, quote unquote, need mushrooms first. A year of mindfulness, yoga, somatic work, being in nature is way better than 25 milligrams of psilocybin in a doctor's office. Again, I think there's a really great point there, especially when people reach out to me talking about they need mushrooms, they need to be doing this. I'm obviously a little biased because of my background, but have you tried any of these other therapies? Sometimes people, yes. And other times people, no, but they've just read the headlines and they feel very fixated that they're going to get the mystical experience. But one thing breathwork has taught me is that it's accessible, and there's other forms. And just, I guess, coming from some of that somatic approach, like even to do some of that inner work before going into a psychedelic session, how can you learn the language of your nervous system before going in and maybe actually going deeper when you start to have a psychedelic experience? And so, I think there is this like need and education around like maybe how to best prepare, and we don't need to jump in the deep end right away. Those are some of my thoughts. Anybody else want to pick up any of these points if you have?
Yes, I totally agree about that. Psychedelics is not the cure for everything. Since we last met in 2017, I guess, I was starting to become quite ill myself. So in 2018, I had an episode. I had this parasite infection. And I spent 6 months in my bed and in the sofa. I couldn't do anything anymore. And at that point in time, I could try to do more psychedelics to get me out of that. But that's not what helped me out of it. It was really mindfulness. It was being aware of every thought, becoming aware of every emotion that you have. And this, I really developed my mindfulness skill at that point in time. It really helped me through that period that I couldn't do anything anymore. And I had a diagnosis of a post-infectious fatigue problem. And this is a problem that only 3% of the people fully recover, and 50% is not able to work full-time anymore. And this is related also to all the negative thinking, all the negative emotions that are accompanied. So I really focused really hard on that one. And if I have to choose, and now I retrained myself also as a mindfulness trainer, also integration coach. But if people ask me what should I do first or what is most important, then I would say don't wait with psychedelics, but learn to be aware of what you're thinking, learn to be aware of what your emotions are, what is in your body. This is more important because this is your real life. The psychedelic or the mystical experience is life-changing, and it's good to have once in a while, but you're living in this moment. You're living right now. So it's more important for me to be aware of what you have now than to chase the other psychedelic experience after each other.
I love that.
No, it's wise words. I agree. I think what Dr. Mclean also is referencing in the first point, right, that depression is a community problem, a family problem, a cultural problem for a lot of people. And we have a blog that just came out about this on the website today, which is that, this whole system of kind of shoving a psychedelic into the old psychiatry model where you just one-on-one meet with the therapist, talk about stuff and then kind of box it up for the rest of the week is not really how everyone heals. And that a lot of our problems are problems of isolation in our Western society, and that community, what we're really lacking is community. And maybe some of our symptoms would be uplifted if we had more community, more access to community. And I think that this is also reflected in the results of the study. And I don't know if we'll talk about Rosalind Watts. Dr. Rosalind Watts is, I guess she's not a doctor, is she? Or I'm not sure. She is. Her perspective after this, but she has also written a response that perhaps the non-statistical difference in both of the SSRI and the psilocybin results are actually more reflective of how much community support each participant got. Each participant got like 35 or 40 hours of like really intense psychotherapy, with like 2 therapists and feeling part of this team and this big, push. And they feel really part of something really important in being in these studies, whether they got the psilocybin placebo or not. And so we have an article coming out that just came out today on the blog about the community healing aspect of psychedelics, and that just using a drug on its own in this like isolated situation maybe isn't enough for people, but like attending community events like integration circles, psychedelic societies, talking about this stuff with your family and friends, and just having more opportunities for community is where a lot of healing occurs. And so I think that's an important part to mention for sure as we continue to dive into this response.
Yeah, and maybe we'll just switch over to her response there, since it's on topic and it's much shorter than Catherine's post there. This is by Dr. Rosalind Watts. After 2 years leading this trial, you might think I'd be disappointed that psilocybin didn't outperform SSRIs. Many people point out the limits of SSRIs, and yet psilocybin has all this hype and expectation around it. Yet this result is something to celebrate because I think it goes to show the power of care. All participants in this trial, whether in the SSRI group or the psilocybin group, received 35 to 40 hours of therapy with one or both their dedicated therapist guides. Our team of therapists created something special, something with connectedness and communitas at its core, and we supported all participants with the utmost care and attention, and in parentheses, and clinical supervision. Everyone went through the ACE therapy, so that's acceptance, connect, and embody therapy protocol. One group had 2 full-day sessions guided by 2 therapists, high-dose psilocybin, and 2 months of ACE therapy sessions, and then 6 weeks of sugar pill. The other group had 2 full-day sessions guided by 2 therapists, so low-dose psilocybin and 2 months of ACE therapy sessions, and 6 weeks of SSRIs. Many people in both groups got better, in parentheses here, not forever, and the depression came back after a few months for the most. But the relief and connectedness many felt, even temporary, was wonderful to witness. Their journeys were there by no means simple or easy. So much pain was expressed in that room from people in both groups. Psilocybin's a great tool, but I think that our results show the magic in genuine care, time, presence, respect, and being part of a healing community. And that is what's so sorely missing from our psychiatric system. So if psilocybin becomes just another drug, it will be as uninspiring and ultimately disappointing as SSRIs for many. And psychedelics without caring community may turn out to not be just as effective, but also risky. The level of care in our clinical trial would be so incredibly expensive, but there are sustainable ways for people to go through psychedelic experiences with very high level of support and care. We can take inspiration from community movements like AA, which I'm really glad she's pointing out there. I know this is something we've brought up a bunch of times about like peer support groups and the power of that and how that can be more cost effective and a little bit outside of that clinical scope where it could cost lots of money for treatment. So I'm glad as a clinical psychologist, she is pointing that out as an option there going forward.
An important aspect of like how these psychedelics are working for depression and other mental health conditions in these trials, right? And that's usually the big difference between however else people are using psychedelics is they have this incredible support system given to them by the psychiatrists and the guides, the therapists. And I wonder if there were future trials that, well, I guess the reason they do this is because some of the trials from the 50s and 60s didn't, right? And they just like left people in sterile rooms alone, like strapped down to beds, like on LSD and stuff. And that, even though some people had really powerful experiences, they really wanted to optimize that setting level of this therapy, right? And so I think it's really important.
Grim picture.
Sorry.
Not all of it was. Not all. I know,
but
like
there was some like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Bill Richards wrote about it when he got his first dose in Europe. He was like strapped down to a table, I'm pretty sure, and that's crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, the community aspect of this is real. And, even Colin Pooh from the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society wrote the article in our blog that I've been talking about. And he writes, like, even the retreat model, it's like, it's not really based around community. You do psychedelics in this group, but then once you leave the retreat center, there's maybe like a couple follow-up calls and that's it. So it's not surprising that depression comes back. If your depression is, even if you were not totally aware of it, like a result of isolation and a lack of community. And so it's really important. I really, even though the AA model has its flaws, the community aspect of it is really important and really works for so many people. And so I think Rosalind is onto something. I think that is a good place to take inspiration from. I think, I really do. And, so if we go back to Katherine's response, she does talk a bit about how, what we're missing here is also legalization, regulation, decriminalization of psychedelics like mushrooms. We should have both, right? We should have this open science to try to prove these things, but maybe like the clinical model isn't really where we need to be proving that this works. Maybe in the community model, we're going to see more effective results. And we won't be able to have that until it's legal and therefore safe for everyone to participate in. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a point that I just wanted to comment on about the retreat model of like, and I've even felt this, like I think Joe and I have mentioned like there's this kind of specialness around like the Dream Shadow community. And when I was living in Vermont, I felt like that was my community. I mean, they were very close and people came from really just like, the Northeast and, we'd come there and it was kind of like this core group that would get together every few months. And sometimes people would miss like a year or so and come back, but it felt like this core group. But there was also this part, even though that felt more local, like a localized community at times, it was like, oh, this is like my special place that I can go to and I can't find community around me that understands this stuff, right? And what would it be like to have more localized communities to be engaging in this stuff versus I need to go someplace to be home, to be around people that really understand what's going on with me, versus finding that more locally. I think that's important.
Right. So what's legal where you live? There's probably some things that are legal. And, perhaps it's time to make a small little group. Everybody reads the Fadiman book. Everybody reads a few other books. And perhaps you take it really slow. And therefore, you're not paying an expert, much more than $20 per book if you're buying them, Of course, there's some risks there. But if you don't have the financing, it's not the worst way to go. Though there is great reason to get with some experts too. Depends on what you're working with, where you're at in your life, right? If you're in deep crisis, probably not the right move. If you're, 40 years old, relatively stable, able to take a big risk, cool. The clinical model is not for everybody. Like Katherine suggested, she used the $25,000 price tag. I always say 15, but who knows where it's going to land. But this is a lot of money. And it's, even if it's covered by insurance, which there's no guarantee of insurance companies paying for this stuff yet, it's still going to be extraordinarily expensive out of pocket and not for everybody. Like, I don't think Medicare, Medicaid, or like even Canada's national healthcare system will pay for this. Even UK, I kind of doubt it. Probably we're 20 years out from that kind of thing going on. So what does that mean in the meantime? It means we're kind of on our own to take care of ourselves right now until this stuff becomes a little bit more democratic. Growing mushrooms is cheap as hell. We talk about that all the time. It's fun as hell too. Not that I've done it. Yeah, right. I've admitted to doing it a bunch on the show. I just had to stop growing because of the show. That's all. Yeah, no, for real. I wish. I want to grow so bad, but I can't. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot going on here. There is some fuckery in the data, always, like hiding suicides. There's always, profit motive. There's always, culture is sick as hell. There's no way around that. Especially culture in the United States. Tim, I don't know if you feel European culture is sick too, but maybe that's worth asking.
Should I be honest?
Yes.
Yeah. Not as sick as in the US, but definitely also sick. But no, it depends on what aspect of society you're looking at, of course. There are always good and bad things to notice. Some things in the US I cannot understand. Is like the availability of like rifles, of machine guns and this. And then for other people I talk to, it's quite normal that you have these things and they really see it as taking away their freedom. So there is a big cultural thing between Europe and the US. Yes.
It sounds like you have a deeper trust of your government establishment. We have a deep distrust of our establishment here.
Yes, I understand that too. Mm-hmm. But I don't just trust the government. I know, but at least when they fuck you, it's financial. Most of the time, we have one of the highest taxes in the world in Belgium, personal taxes. And
what percentage? Do you know offhand?
60 something personal taxes. Yes, and then you would expect that you have the best healthcare. We have a good healthcare, but you would expect that this country is run the most efficient way, and it is totally not the case, of course. Mm-hmm. So yes, if that would be the case, I would be less suspicious about it. But that's sadly not the case.
Right. I was just talking to somebody who's doing mission work in Puerto Rico this morning. And they were talking, because they've been hit by 2 hurricanes really badly. The United States is not taking care of Puerto Rico at all. And then a lot of the funds are just getting stolen and not making it to where it needs to go. And now they've been hit by COVID, and it's even worse than it was before, So we see this everywhere, right? Wherever there's money, there's going to be kind of some leeches or vultures hanging out, trying to make some big grabs. And we see that at all scales, from pharma to, mission recovery work. So what to do? Eat more mushrooms? I don't know. Having these conversations, I think, is the right thing to do. Because, I'm not totally against these capitalist groups. I'm just kind of against their fuckery and manipulation and, hiding data, kind of lying in a way, selling us things, but having a lot of lies hidden in the closet. That's not great.
Yeah, I think we should expand upon this, this suicide in the clinical trials thing that we keep kind of brushing against and not talking about.
Because if there's any experts that we could hire to write on that. That would be a really cool article. Scary, wouldn't make us any friends, but I think that's important. Do you have anything you want to share now, though, Michelle?
Well, I guess just addressing, Katherine Mclean put this in her post, and we haven't really addressed it for anyone listening and wondering what we're talking about. The third point in her reaction to the depression trial, I'll read it. Number 3, suicides in clinical trials are being covered up or hidden deep in supplementary sections of papers. I have heard of suicides in psilocybin studies that don't get reported at all or do not get reported in the main text where it is easy to see. Why the lack of transparency? Well, suicides are bad PR. Plus, the researchers and ethics review boards do not believe that these suicides are related to study participation. I do not agree, Katherine. We need to understand how dangerous psilocybin is in this population, but also, and perhaps more importantly, how dangerous it can be to offer a miracle cure to a depressed person and then it doesn't work. As Bill Richards said, the depressed person in the Hopkins cancer trial killed himself because he was disappointed after not getting a high-dose mystical experience in his first session. If that is true, then this is a study-related death. This is unacceptable in my eyes. Honestly, until I read this response, I had no idea that there were suicides occurring in the clinical trials. I was shocked, but I'm also not surprised. And I think it does have to do with this expectation effect. I also think, often in these trials, sometimes people are given like a low dose first, or like there's a control group that's only given a low dose. And I've experienced an increase in suicidal thoughts on low doses of psilocybin. Now, for me, and I wrote about it in Playboy, the article is called Bliss Your Heart, if folks want to go read it. But for me, I interpreted my increase of suicidal thoughts as something that needed to bubble up and I needed to face head on when I was on the medicine. And it did turn out to work out that way for me, but that's just because I knew how to frame it and contextualize this feeling in my own world as someone who was struggling. But I think for other folks, this is a real thing. And I don't mean to bring it up to hurt the progress of the research in any way. But I think that especially when we're talking about a depressed population, and some of the folks in these trials have been depressed for like 20 years. Like, I can't even imagine that. It's pretty devastating. It's really gutting to hear. And I think that's part of the problem of selling this as a miracle cure, because if people's expectations aren't met, then they could think that they're like so broken. Like, I'm so fucking broken that even psychedelics don't work on me. Like, what is the point of living? And that it's so gutting to hear. And I really think in those instances, probably more community, not that would have answered the problem, but I don't know, like having more of a community around this and being open around this and not hiding it is so important. And so if you do feel more depressed after a psychedelic session, know that that's not abnormal, right? Know that there's hope for you. You can integrate those feelings and that'll probably help. But this is really kind of shocking and disturbing for me personally. And I kind of really felt we should talk about it.
I want to maybe go a little easy on the clinical people. I get what they're doing. I find it a little funny. The ethics board isn't really going hard on it. I find that a little suspect, but I know of psychedelic related suicides. One really close to me, really heavy LSD user, blew himself up somehow. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like, he had so many things going for him. And I'm sure if I thought hard, I could find others. But Kyle, Tim, have you heard of psychedelic related suicides?
Mm-hmm. Actually, it was the first time I heard about this case, and it was surprising. I heard about the sexual abuse in the MDMA studies, but this was a suicide. But I heard it about one of the big centers in Costa Rica. I will not mention any name, but there was also a suicide-related incident. Somebody who was promised a miracle, and they literally used the word miracle. And
it's a good tip. I know what you're talking about now.
And it's a story. So I'm not the first-hand witness. So it's a story. But it was said that she had this kind of very dark visuals and she was suicidal before, and that she was one of the one of the couple percent, a few percent that doesn't receive the miracle. So a few weeks after she got home, she also committed suicide. And I think one of the things we have to be very honest about is what can be the outcome. What can you expect from a psychedelic experience? The mystical experience is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious to see in the surveys of the retreats how many people get the mystical experience, but it's really many people get them after a few times or never maybe. So it's really we should not be able should not chase this kind of experience.
I agree. I think
important.
A mystical experience should be framed as something maybe to work towards in your psychedelic work. I didn't get one until I did a lot of inner work, right? I did a lot of tripping and meditating and different doses. And at the one time I really got it, and I was really just so comfortable and felt so supported by everyone around me, and it clicked. But I mean, that took so many different journeys. And so when I read the studies, I always think like, is it because they're giving people such high doses that they but I don't think so. I think that tripping is a skill, or journeying, or psychedelic work, and that you should, practice that skill, build those muscles, and then maybe it can happen for you. But like, we shouldn't sell it as like, you take a psychedelic, you have a mystical experience, you're never depressed again. That doesn't sit right. That doesn't usually happen.
Right. I mean, if you look at like shamanism, that is a skill, right? Like the shaman like prepares for years and years and years and understands how to journey through these different realms, these different dimensions. They have the tool set to be able to do that. And this like really kind of brings up this interesting point. I think Deanna Rogers brought it up in the shadow panel. Is this like kind of passive role that we take with Western medicine? I'm going to take a pill, have a mystical experience, or I'm going to take a pill and the pill is going to heal me. I don't need to do anything. Versus this more active role where it's a relationship, and I think journeying is a relationship. Like, how do you start to develop a relationship with these inner realms and these inner dimensions and understand how to navigate through that? And that's something that I feel like a lot of people don't really talk about, right? It's like, and that's what I guess I kind of appreciated about like some of Stan's work, like, having this like these cartography of the psyche. Like, what is the cartography of your psyche? Do you understand how to navigate that? Like, and I feel like that is really important. I remember this one time I found myself in a terrifying experience, and it was when I was in college, and it took a very, I would say a low dose. Like, me and a friend split like 3.5 grams, so we got like 1.7. And it got really, really dark, and we hugged each other and we said, this is it, we're going to die. And he's like, I think I'm going to call my dad. And I was like, I think this is a good idea. Let's say bye to everybody we love. But there was a point in me, I sat down and said, wait a minute, I've been here before. And I was like, I feel like I know how to get out of this. You just got to follow me. And there was some sort of psychic thing that was unfolding. And, when I talk to him now, it's like we can both relate of going, we were both in this together, and there was some sort of like kind of telepathy thing happening. But there was this navigation of me going, or at least for my experience, I can't really speak for his, but there was this sense of me that went, I know where I am in my psychic realm, and I know how to navigate through this because I've been here before. I have a map of it. And I think that's really important to really understand that and to start to develop those skills. And that's why I keep going back to like things like, somatic work, breath work, like understanding these different like traditional cultures that have some sort of framework and cosmology around navigating these different like dimensions or realities, as some people would call it. And maybe that's weird language for the Western world and the scientific world, right? Like, we just got some comments on that, the most recent podcast, like on Ralph's work, and it was like, hey, keep UFOs out of here. And there's like people are saying like you're gonna like damage psychedelic reputation if you continue to talk about this stuff. And my head goes, have you ever been so far in that world where you're talking to entities? I mean, that starts to make sense then, right? I mean, you need some sort of transpersonal framework, I think, to make sense of what the hell was that? Did I just talk to an alien entity? Like, is that real? Maybe it's an archetypal energy, and we don't need to go down the alien UFO rabbit hole. But these are experiences that people have under the influence of high-dose psychedelics in those mystical experiences. And to sit there and not talk about that, I don't know.
More shadow.
Yeah, more shadow.
Yeah. I'm always trying to amplify the shadow, I guess. I don't know. Like the reactions are so weird to that alien article. And I'm like, no, like this is important. Like this is really critical to discuss entities. If we're not discussing it, we're hiding it. And that's kind of where I disagree with Matt Johnson a little bit on like, let's not talk about it. I'm like, no, fuck no. Like we should definitely be doing it. Like what is informed consent if we're hiding data? Yeah. So sorry, Matt, if you heard that. I really appreciate your work and your approach, but I just disagree with you on that point for a number of reasons. Anyway, I think we're getting close to the end. We're definitely over an hour.
Yeah, we only hit like 1 out of 3 points with Katherine's post. So I think it's a public. I think it's a public post.
It is.
Try to find that, but she's got like 13 total, maybe 14. She made an additional comment there.
And we'll talk with her about how we can get that public if we're able to share it on our feed or something like that. Or maybe even get her to write a blog post or something, which would be tight. So, Katherine, thanks for your work and your commitment. It shows that you care. And yeah, there's a lot of work left to do here. All right. So, as a way of wrapping up, Tim, let's talk about your project. Again, psychedelicexperience.net launches Friday, the 24th. I don't even really know how the calendar works anymore. Saturday, the 24th of April, 2021, the relaunch of psychedelicexperience.net. Anything you want to say about it? Just to remind folks.
Yes. Please join us. We have this exciting Q&A. You hear this on Friday probably, so we have this on Saturday. It will be with David Luke from Breaking Convention and Pat, who created the Psychedelia documentary. It's a very good documentary. If you subscribe, you can also screen it. You can watch it in your own time. It doesn't have to be live. So just join the community. Like us on social media, follow us. We have exciting things to come. We really want to create this community effort to have the biggest directory of psychedelic organizations, shamans, coaches, therapists, etc., so that people know where to go for a safe and responsible experience, which is very important.
Woo. Thank you, Tim. I would just like to quickly, before we sign off, also back to the alien UFO topic, we are giving away 5 copies of Ralph Blumenthal's new book, The Believer, which covers the work of psychiatrist John Mack with alien abductees, who I also wrote about for the blog a few months ago. So definitely sign up to win a copy of the book. It's so good. Me and Joe both read it and loved it. And check out our episode with Ralph Blumenthal. I think it was a really fascinating one.
Yeah. It's such a cool topic and so much more coming down the pipes. So yeah, thanks to Tim. If you want to check out our classes, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you all. And yeah, let's hang out and debrief for a minute. We'll catch you on the next episode, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.